Today we're looking back at the 2021 NHL expansion draft, where the Seattle Kraken had an opportunity to pick 30 players from the other NHL clubs. Of course, their first season is now coming to a close. It has not been a good season when it comes to wins and losses in the standings. Today we're going to take a look back at that expansion draft and see if they had an opportunity to do things over in some of the star players they passed on. Would they do it again, or would they do things differently? And that's coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're redrafting the original 30 players taken by the Seattle Kraken in the NHL expansion draft just last year in 2021. I know many of us had predicted who was going to be on the roster. We completed a lot of mock drafts leading into this, and I think it's very fair to say that almost everybody at least had a lot of surprises when it comes to the players that were selected by the Seattle Kraken. We've seen several players not even make it through one season on this roster. Very few were traded ahead of the season like we saw with the Vegas Golden Knights, but we did see several players either lost through waivers, traded back to the clubs that they were originally selected from, or just never really saw any playing time. There's certainly a lot of questionable picks, in my opinion. We've seen several players that were available that might have had some question marks around them, but had a really good NHL pass. We're looking at guys like Carey Price in Montreal, Vladimir Tarasenko in St. Louis, Jake Voracek in Philadelphia, all kinds of top-tier talent that they wanted nothing to do with. If they had an opportunity to go back and do it again, would they still make those same selections? Would they do things differently? Today I'm going to offer my opinion on that. So we're going to head on to the computer. We're going to go on to capfriendly.com, where they still have the Seattle expansion draft tool on their website with all the original players that were available and protected, and we can make new selections and see what opportunities they would have as a do-over. So clearly the picks they made differed greatly from the picks I thought they would make and what we predicted and made mock draft videos leading into this. So I think there's an opportunity to have a better season here. Clearly the vision that Ron Francis and his team has in Seattle was not the same as a lot of other people, but I would hope even with their vision and even with what they thought was going to come this season, that they would admit that there was an opportunity to do a little bit better here. I know they're more about the long haul. This is more of a traditional expansion franchise versus what we saw with Vegas, where they drafted very well. They obviously had a lot of side deals. They had a lot of trades happen immediately after, and they really positioned themselves for immediate success, even though we didn't all see that coming to the level that we did. It happened, and they've had 4 solid years of being a playoff team, including one season, which was the first one, going all the way to the Stanley Cup final. So it can be done, and Seattle clearly wants to go more of the long road here, which is fine. But like I said, this first season was anything but a success when it comes to wins and losses, in my opinion. So let's hop on the computer and redraft this original Kraken team. Now, before we redraft, let's remind ourselves who the original selections were for the Kraken. From Anaheim, they took Hayden Fleury. Arizona, they selected Tyler Pitlick. From Boston, they selected Jeremy Lauzon. From Buffalo, they selected Will Borgen. From Calgary, they took Captain Mark Giordano, becoming the first captain in Kraken history. Carolina, they selected Morgan Geekie. Out of Chicago, they took John Quenneville. Out of Colorado, they took Jonas Donskoy. From Columbus, they took Gavin Baybrother. At Dallas, they signed Jamie Alexiak to a free agent contract. Out of Detroit, they took Dennis Cholowski. From Edmonton, they signed free agent defenseman Adam Larson. From Florida, they signed free agent goalie Chris Treager. From the LA Kings, they took defenseman Curtis McDermott. From the Minnesota Wild, they selected defenseman Carson Soucy. Out of Montreal, they took defenseman Cale Fleury. From Nashville, they took forward Calle Yarncroke. From the Devils, they took forward Nathan Bastian. From the Islanders, they took Jordan Eberle. New York Rangers, they selected forward Colin Blackwell. From Ottawa, they took young goalie Joey Decord. From Philly, they took Carson Twarynski. From Pittsburgh, they took Brandon Tanev. From the Sharks, they took prospect Alexander True. From St. Louis, they took defenseman Vince Dunn. From Tampa, they took center iceman Yanni Gourde. From Toronto, they selected Jared McCann. From Vancouver, it was Cole Lynn. Washington, they selected Vitek Vanacek. And with the Winnipeg Jets selection, they took forward Mason Appleton. So as you can see, we're now on the capfriendly.com website. We're in the Seattle expansion draft tool. I've completed my selections. Now we're going to go through them. So we've drafted 30 players. We have 15 forwards, 9 defensemen. I've taken 6 goalies And I'll go through here the reasons for that. I do intend on making some trades here, of course. We have more than enough contracts. Minimum requirement was 20. We have 27. We have a cap hit of 79.7 million out of 81.5. So we're cap compliant. And the other thing here as well is that, keep in mind, like I said, I plan on trading a few of these contracts out. So we're not going to have the cap hit that high. And we're not going to carry so many players. So since I'm redoing this, I would have done things differently than Seattle did. And I would have made a few more deals from the beginning. Now, on to the first selections here, the Anaheim Ducks. I decided to leave that pick the same. We're staying with Hayden Fleury. If you look at what else was available, there really wasn't a lot in the forward group that was interesting. You get Adam Henrique, Milano, Grant. I thought Fleury's a good young defenseman. That was fine to leave the way it was. In Arizona, they took Tyler Pitlick and then they flipped him for a draft pick. This time I'm taking Ilya Lyubushkin. Lyubushkin's recently been traded to the Maple Leafs, a real solid, rugged, physical defenseman. To me, that would have been great for the Kraken. Fairly low cost, good guy to have around. Seems to be a very popular teammate. I think that would have been a way better selection than Tyler Pitlick. On to Boston. They took Jeremy Lauzon, who's no longer with the franchise. To me, I would have taken Curtis Lazar. Lazar is a really solid bottom six forward. He makes slightly less money than Lauzon as well by $50,000. Not a huge difference, but every little bit helps here. And somebody who I could see being a real solid fourth liner for you for a lot longer than Jeremy Lauzon stuck around on the D-Corps. On the Sabres, they took obviously a player here in Buffalo that, it was surprising, William Borgen. No offense to Borgen, but he has not really played in Seattle. Maybe he's a trade piece. I don't know, but it really, to me, was a better option here. That's Dustin Tokarski. I know some might argue it's not really better, but here's the rationale. One, he makes less money, so you get a little bit of cap savings. Tokarski's a guy who you could put in the minors and be a good number 3, number 4 goalie, or maybe he's one of the goalies we trade. As you can see, I selected 6 goalies, and maybe it just makes sense that he's one of the guys I flip here. Even if I only get a 4th or 5th round pick for him, it's still better than the other options here. I mean, you could look to a guy like Jeff Skinner, who has bounced back, but that contract to me is still too much for what you get. Although, I do have some other bigger contracts that I did pick up in this draft, but Skinner, for me, wasn't going to be one of them. For Calgary, I'm still staying with Giordano as a selection here. He worked well for the Kraken. They get a decent return for him at the trade deadline, not as well as some other defensemen, but still a pretty, decent return. Served his purpose there as a 1-year guy with a veteran presence, good leader, and based on what else was available, I wouldn't change anything in that regard. On to Carolina. Now Carolina, I'm selecting Nino Niederreiter. Now I thought in the case of the Carolina Hurricanes that they could have done better here. Morgan Geekie's an okay player, but he's not even in the lineup consistently. Niederreiter's a proven player. He's not on a long-term contract. He was only signed for another season, and to me, would have been a great player for your top 6. Could have been a good contributor, and even if you didn't see him being there longer term, could have been another asset like Giordano that you flipped at the deadline for more future assets. On to the Blackhawks. Now, the Chicago Blackhawks here, I'm taking center iceman right winger Ryan Carpenter, and this time around, they selected John Quenneville before, who's really was on an expiring contract, wasn't really going anywhere. He's 25 years old. Carpenter's a little bit more established. He's only on a 1-year deal, $1 million, good bottom 6 guy. You either put him in your bottom 6 or you trade him for something. To me, that was a better selection. Now, the Colorado Avalanche, they took Don Skoy here, who had a couple of years left at $3.9 million, 29 years old. I would have selected JT Compher. To me, the long-term upside is a little bit higher. He makes a little bit less money, same term on his contract, makes $400,000 less, 3 years younger, and to me, could be a better offensive player. So to me, I like that pick much better. On to Columbus, where they took Gavin Baybrother, who's not even with the organization anymore. Again, another baffling, head-scratching pick. This time, I'm selecting Gabriel Carlson, who's only making $725, was signed for 1 more year as an RFA. So to me, that made more sense. I did contemplate Max Domi, but with some of the other bigger contracts I wanted to take, there just wasn't room salary cap wise. But either pick here, in my opinion, would have been better than what the Kraken originally did. The Dallas Stars, they signed Jamie Alexiak as a free agent defenseman to count as a pick for the Stars, and I would leave it that way. I think he's a good fit there. I don't mind the contract. Detroit Red Wings, this time around, instead of taking Dennis Cholowski, I would take Troy Stecher, more serviceable of a defenseman, only signed for another year at 1.7. To me, a guy who could be like Giordano, depending on how you see him longer term. He either gets re-signed for a decent amount, a fair contract to play your either second or third pair, or you trade him for, even if it's a fourth, fifth round pick, you'll load up on picks at the deadline. Either way, he would have been a better selection than what they picked. The Edmonton Oilers signed Adam Larson, and I would leave that. Looking at the other options here, I wasn't taking James Neal or Kyle Turris based on their recent performance. So it's either boils down to Larson, or you go after Chris Russell and, or like Koskinen, which you didn't really want to do either. So I like the Larson signing and can see that working out. Florida. The Florida Panthers now had some interesting selections here, to say the least. They signed Chris Driedger, but of course, to me, that has not worked out. But neither really has Grubauer. Both goalies that they got here, I mean, technically, Driedger counted as an expansion pick, but lots of interesting picks here. They could have went with Vetrano, Achari, Blomberg, who I'm taking here today. Either Radko Gudas even. They got some good players here that they totally passed on. And I know Driedger's put up some real good numbers, but it was a small sample size. That was what concerned me about Chris Driedger, is that he had a real solid team in front of him. It was putting up good numbers, and now you're starting to have second thoughts here already. But Ryan Lomberg plays hard. He plays physical, gets a little bit of offense to his game. They only make it $725 for another year. Could be a solid bottom six guy with some energy and physicality. So I like that pick much better, in my opinion. And I had some better goaltending options that I like better over Chris Driedger. In Los Angeles, of course, McDermott was on the roster here. Of course, that's where he ended up being the selection. And I wouldn't completely, go against that. But with some of the other guys I've picked, then I decided to go against McDermott and take Blake Lizotte, who I can see as being a bigger part of the future. Now, Lizotte's 23, signed for another year, $925. He has since signed an extension with the Kings, which he could have done in Seattle as well. Not for a lot of money either. And could have been a bottom six, like a third line player with a decent amount of upside. I like Lizotte as a player, and to me, would have made more sense on a long-term basis than McDermott. Although, they obviously picked McDermott and they ended up trading him, which is fine. I like McDermott too, but I like Lizotte more on a long-term basis. In Minnesota, they had some interesting options here to pick from. They passed on goalie Kaapo Kähkönen, which I think they would do again, and they're going to stay with Carson Soucy. I don't mind that pick, making 2.75 for a couple seasons. Looking what else is out there, Rask, Bukestad. Yeah, I think I'll pass those and we'll stay with Soucy. In Montreal, I'm taking Carey Price. Now, this is going to be a controversial pick. I know a lot of people are going to say I'm crazy, but you know what? Even though he was out all season, looking at his contract, to me, if it doesn't work out and he can't play health-wise, you have LTI. You have other options here. But to me, look at what Carey Price did in Montreal just last season. Look at the difference in Montreal 1 year to the next without Carey Price. I know there's more to the story than just a goalie, but we've said for years that Carey Price carries that team, and the Habs go as far as Price goes, and he was playing out of his mind, helping them get to the Stanley Cup final. They had a lot of other players contribute to that, don't get me wrong. But for me, you have an opportunity to take one of the top goalies in the world, and he was willing to waive to do it. I would take that option. I mean, Cale Fleury, yes, he's a decent young defenseman who can, hopefully be a part of the team's future. But to me, I could not pass up Carey Price. And I really wanted to see, to be honest, by taking the Price contract, how else you could construct a team to make how competitive it could be. And I do like how the team worked out here. So I'm willing to take my chances with Price based on what else I could get here. Going on to Nashville, I'm taking Matt Duchene. I know it's hard to have a crystal ball, and we probably wouldn't have predicted that he would bounce back and not only bounce back, but have a career season in Nashville with 40 goals. But, having that crystal ball and the fact that we can do that today, I would take that. So to me, the contracts I'm taking a risk on in this expansion draft are now Price and Duchene, whereas last year I would have had different thoughts. Like I would have had concerns over the Price injury, perhaps. But even then, I really thought they were going to. I really had a hard time understanding how they could pass it up. And Duchene, completely different story. But the fact that we can go back here a year later, I would certainly take that option here and kind of add that to the roster. I mean, really, Kelly Yarncroke was okay. They got a good return for him at the deadline, trading him to Calgary. But Duchene, if he was scoring 40 goals, you'd like to see him do that in a Kraken uniform. In New Jersey, they took Nathan Bastian. Nathan Bastian ended up there. This time I'm taking Scott Wedgwood. Just a depth goaltender, somebody who can be a 3-4 guy, or somebody who I can trade for a mid-round pick. We've seen him bounce around a bit, but he's played well, and he served his purpose. And you need a few players like that making cheap money, but can be valuable at the same time. Islanders, I'm sticking with Jordan Eberle. Certainly some other options here, but I think with what's available, we're going to stick with Eberle. I mean, I know he could have had a better season in Seattle, but it could have been worse too. And with what's there, I just don't know that I really like other options better. I contemplated going with a guy like Kiefer Bellows. Certainly a lot of players on this team are going to be a combination of young and veterans. And I guess that's probably the only other direction I would go here is instead of taking Eberle, I would consider Bellows. But considering how harder time he's had, I guess you could say, with the Islanders getting established, that gives me a little bit of concerns as well. Now, the New York Rangers, they selected Colin Blackwell, and I'm going to leave that pick the same. The money is good, and for what you get, the money's real good, in my opinion. They traded him afterwards for a decent return, so to me, that makes a lot of sense, and I wouldn't change anything in that regard. Ottawa, they took young goalie Joey Decord, and I would still do the same as well. Joey, I think, could be potential goalie at the NHL level, solid here in a couple of years' time. I still think he needs a little bit of work, but he's progressing good. He's a good number 3 guy, which has served his purpose in Seattle, kind of going up and down. And I would leave that pick the same. The Flyers. Now, this one was interesting. I'm taking a chance here on Shane Gostisbehere. We've seen how he's played in Arizona this year, much better than the last few years in Philly. And they took Carson Twarynski. I mean, most people, when they heard that pick, they're like, who, what, where, what, like, what, why? You know, like, I'm passing on Voracek and JVR. I'll take the chance on Gostisbehere's hit because it's a lot less, and it's obviously, not too long, couple of years. And seeing how he's played this year, I would take that chance, to be honest. So to me, Gostisbehere becomes the new selection in Philly. In Pittsburgh, I'm going to leave it at Brandon Tanev. He got off to a real hot start in Seattle, was a major fan favorite, played well, unfortunately got hurt, and the season ended quite early. And based on what else we can pick for goalies and defensemen, I like the selection. And we're going to leave Tanev going to the Kraken here from Seattle. San Jose, they took Alex True. I wasn't really sure on that. I don't know how much of a future he has. So I'm this time going with Dylan Gambrell. I contemplated Jacob Middleton, now knowing what we know about him from before. Obviously, this season he had to get traded, and he's doing well. But Gambrell, to me, gives you a good, solid fourth-line center, making $700,000. So I like the contract. Only under contract for another year. And to me, I like to pick better than True. Same age as Alex True, but a lot more NHL experience. And so far, even on a team that's not doing very well, you haven't seen Alex True play very many NHL games. Now, St. Louis was real interesting. They took Vince Dunn. They passed on Tarasenko, but this time, even though Tarasenko's doing real well, and it's real tempting to take him this time, I'm going with Ville Husso, who was signed for another year as a goaltending option after they protected Jordan Binnington. Look at what Husso's done. He's basically taken Binnington's job. And if you could have predicted that, you could have a goalie for your first year at $750. You can get him signed, extended beyond that, instead of taking a guy like Chris Driedger. To me, would have been way better. So as much as I think Tarasenko's obviously healthy, playing well, and I would seriously think about it if I'm them, it's just too hard to pass up on Husso, who could be the goalie of the immediate future for you. He's 26 years old, but if you can get him to be the goalie for the next 5 to 7 years and get him for nothing in expansion and not have to, the first year contract's cheap, to me, you can't pass that up. Whereas Tarasenko, you might get for 2 years. He may not want to stay because he might want to go on a team that's, more poised for a cup or whatever. So, and I understand why they had concerns over the health, but clearly those wouldn't be a concern today. Tampa Bay, I'm going to leave the pick with Yanni Gourde. He's a real good center iceman. Obviously I wouldn't take Johnson. Tempting to take Alex Killorn because he makes a little bit less money, a little bit less term, but I like the pick for Yanni Gourde. To me, he's likely going to be the future captain of this team now that Giordano's been traded. So to me, that's what I would leave the way it is. Matthew Joseph was another real solid option that I contemplated as well. The Toronto Maple Leafs, I would leave it at Jared McCann. He's played extremely well in the Kraken organization. He's got a new contract with them. I don't know if there's really anybody else here that was really worth taking more than him. It was between him and Kerfoot, and I like how McCann's fit there. Kerfoot would definitely be my second choice, but that's no point in changing that, I don't think. In Vancouver, I also left the pick at Cole Lynn. just because if you look at what else is available here, I just didn't really see anything that was not signed, that was signed that made sense. Like I'm not taking Virtanen, Roussel, Beagle, or Eriksson. Maybe Zach McEwen. Maybe, I mean, he's since obviously been traded, or he's with Philly now. So, you know, I don't know that some of these players really would be a great option more, but to me, Cole Lynn is still young enough that you have the possibility for the future, and what else is there? We'll leave it be. Washington, we're still taking Vitek Vanacek. I might trade him this time now based on the other goalies we have, but I like him better than most of the selections. I think he's just too solid between his age and his contract. And what else is available here? Like Carl Hagelin, Garnet Hathaway, maybe Brendan Dillon would have been interesting too. But, you know, either way, Vanacek remains the pick. And in Winnipeg, I left it at Mason Appleton as well. The 25-year-old ended up back in Winnipeg. Another head scratcher here. Like, I understand, at least I get a little bit more of a return there. But like Seattle traded a fair bit of players back to their existing clubs, or they just, you know, didn't even get signed. Like Gavin Baybrother in Columbus was a free agent player who they didn't make sure he was signed ahead of time, and they didn't sign him. He re-signed with Columbus like a week later. That was a complete waste of a pick, not to mention a few of these other ones too. So to me, like I wouldn't have done, I think with even like, you know, the handful of picks that we done differently would have made an absolutely huge difference on this team. So in terms of trades, we're probably going to trade at least one, maybe two goaltenders. We're probably going to go with Carey Price. Ville Husso is your 1-2. Joey Decord's probably going to be my number 3. So I'm probably looking to trade a few guys, probably like a Vanacek and a Wedgwood, most likely here. We're probably going to trade, you know, at least maybe one defenseman and a forward or two, try to get some more draft picks as well, and to drop that overall cap hit. So to me, this can be a very competitive, cap compliant team. It would have been doing a lot better than the original Kraken who were on the ice this season. So that is my new Seattle Kraken. If we had an opportunity here to do a do-over, I'd love to know what you think as well. So certainly want to hear your comments in the comment section as to what you would do if you were Ron Francis redrafting and had a chance for a do-over here at this 2021 NHL expansion draft. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.